faithfully conveying value and interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today we'll explore the book The Forest, A Journey of Wonder. Forests always spark our curiosity. What edible plants grow there? How can we spot wild deer or roe deer? What should we wear when entering? And what to do if we encounter danger? And the best person to answer these questions might be the author himself, Peter Wohlleben. Peter worked as a German government civil servant before resigning to manage an environmentally protected forest in the Eifel region, driven by his love for nature. He later compiled his fascinating experiences into books that attracted massive readership, making him a renowned science writer. Sally's Book Talk previously covered his works like The Hidden Life of Trees, The Secret Wisdom of Nature, and The Inner Life of Animals. This book distills his decades of experience working and living in forests. It contains 30 concise chapters covering every aspect of forests. The author not only reveals forest wonders, but also shares professional insights on appreciating flora and fauna and wilderness survival skills. Now, it also includes his macro-level reflections on ecological conservation and human-forest relationships. Today's discussion consolidates the content into 3 parts. First, plants in the forest. Second, animals in the forest. And third, humans in the forest. All right, let's follow the author on this wonderful forest journey. Before entering the forest, we must clarify what defines a forest. So what exactly constitutes a forest? The book cites German forest law. Any land covered by forest vegetation qualifies as forest. Quote, but the author finds this definition too broad. By this standard, timber storage yards, forest roads, and even meadows could be classified as forests. He believes true forests are large tree-enclosed areas, aligning with our intuitive understanding. Forests vary by environment. Tropical rainforests near the equator, coniferous forests in northern regions, Brazil's Amazon rainforest, Germany's Black Forest, and China's Greater Qingyan Mountains are all world-famous forest regions. Today, forests cover about 1/3 of the Earth's land area, undoubtedly crucial components of our planet's ecosystem. When we think of forests, the first image that comes to mind is always those endless stretches of lush green trees. Absolutely, they're the undisputed protagonists of the forest. In this section, we'll explore forest plants primarily through learning tree appreciation methods. We'll also discover the survival challenges these trees currently face. To the author, every tree in the forest possesses unique qualities. To truly appreciate trees' beauty, he suggests engaging all senses, not just sight, but also taste and smell. Take spruce trees. Among Germany's most common trees, where 1 in 4 large trees is a spruce, its wood is ideal for construction and premium papermaking, holding significant economic value. Approaching spruces, you'll immediately notice their remarkably straight growth. Dense clusters of spruces blanketing hillsides create a uniquely forest aesthetic. Spruces stand out easily among coniferous forests. Their reddish-brown bark features tightly packed, rough scales. Their light brown cones often exceed 10 centimeters, observable right from ground level.
Beyond visual observation, don't overlook engaging your sense of taste.
In spring, spruce produce tender buds. If you taste them, you'll find them soft, chewable, and worth savoring. The buds offer lemony notes with subtle resinous undertones, perfect even for brewing tea. Such experiences guarantee spruces will leave lasting impressions. The author volunteers teaching natural science to local elementary students during free time. He often encourages students to taste tree parts for comprehensive understanding. He recalls in the book, at a major youth forest knowledge competition, his students excelled, especially in tree identification, by first biting branches. Besides the buds, a part of the spruce called the cambium layer is also edible. The cambium layer is actually the growth layer of trees. It's a layer of cells beneath the bark, functioning somewhat like stem cells in humans, able to transform into other cells as needed. Some of the cambium layer turns into bark, while some turns into the wood at the tree's core. Around March each year, spruce trees awaken from their dormancy. If you scrape off the bark at this time, you can see a shiny cambium layer. With just a small knife, you can scrape off many creamy white strips from this wood layer. These strips taste somewhat like carrots, and this flavor is definitely a premium item in the forest food list. More importantly, the spruce's cambium layer is very nutritious. It contains not only moisture, but also vitamins and even sugars and carbohydrates. Of course, it must be emphasized that forests also contain many toxic organisms. Without guidance from professionals, we should never try anything recklessly. Beyond appreciating trees through sight and taste, it certainly includes smell. However, when it comes to scent, the author's favorite is the fir tree. If you grasp the fir needles in your hand and crush them slightly, they release a scent like oranges, very refreshing. Moreover, each tree has its own unique scent. Oak bark smells strongly sour, mainly due to a substance called tannic acid. Tannic acid repels pests and also resists mold. Of course, not all scents are pleasant. For example, the ginkgo trees we commonly see have very pleasing appearances, and their extracts have antibacterial and anti-inflammatory effects.
However, the outer skin of ginkgo nuts contains butyric acid and other acids, emitting a vomit-like stench that makes you want to stay away.
Of course, just from textual descriptions, you might not fully appreciate the wonders of trees in the forest. To truly experience them, you still need to personally step into the forest. Beyond appreciation, the author also wants to remind us that these trees face significant survival challenges, primarily global climate change and invasive species. Again, taking spruce as an example, they particularly thrive in damp, cold environments. For instance, some areas in the Alps are their ideal habitats. However, with global warming, many spruce habitats are now becoming less suitable. The author estimates that even a 1-degree rise in global average temperature could cause fatal ecological damage to spruce habitats. Based on current warming trends, spruce could disappear from most forests in Central Europe within just a few decades. Besides climate factors, another serious challenge for trees is invasive species. With globalization, many animals, plants, and bacteria travel by planes and ships worldwide, greatly impacting local species. A typical victim is the ash tree. This tree is a typical native European species with black angular buds and feather-like leaves that can grow up to 40 centimeters long. Very beautiful. However, these ash trees are now dying en masse, and the culprit is a tiny fungus called Hynocyphus fraxinus. The name Hynocyphus uses characters meaning membrane like cling film and disc-like plate. This fungus attacks the ash tree's buds, preventing normal growth. After infection, the ash tree's bark turns beige, unable to fully photosynthesize and produce nutrients. Within a few years of infection, these trees slowly wither and die. Scientific research suggests this fungus was likely brought to Germany via container shipments from Japan. Studies estimate that about 90% of ash trees are infected with this fungus to some extent. Ash trees aren't the only victims of globalization. Elm trees have suffered a similar fate, even more severely. In the early 20th century, a highly aggressive fungus was introduced via imported goods and spread by insects. Once infected, elm trees have zero survival rate. And so, today in Germany, you might only see a lone elm tree in some remote corners. Of course, addressing the threats of climate change and biological invasions to forests requires worldwide cooperation. All right, let's temporarily set aside this heavy topic and continue our forest journey. Walking through the forest, if you only observe trees, you'll eventually get bored. For travelers at this point, the best spice is observing some animals, from large ones like deer and roe deer to small ones like butterflies and spiders. Animals are undoubtedly key players on this stage. So next, in the second part, let's talk about some tips for observing animals in the forest. Additionally, the author also corrects some misconceptions about human-animal interactions, wanting to appreciate the beauty of animals in the forest. According to the author's advice, we need to prepare in 3 aspects: adjusting mindset, choosing timing, and looking for clues. First, you need to mentally prepare yourself. Seeing animals in the forest isn't actually easy. The author summarized a pattern. The larger the animal, the smaller the chance we'll see it. The reason behind this is that larger animals often require more extensive living spaces, meaning they need enough territory to forage for food. On average, a fox needs 1 square kilometer of habitat, while a large wildcat requires over 5 square kilometers to survive relatively easily. For larger animals like the lynx, their range can even reach 50 square kilometers. Moreover, carnivores need far more living space than herbivores. Therefore, in our journey to find animals, we need sufficient patience. Additionally, choosing the right timing for observing animals is also crucial. In Germany, there's a period each year when hunting is permitted. If you enter the forest during this time, you likely won't see any large animals at all, because they've long since sensed hunter signals and hidden themselves. Therefore, if you simply want to watch animals, the author suggests entering the forest just before the hunting season begins, at the end of the closed season, specifically around early May each year, because before hunters start their activities, many animals have grown accustomed to the peace of the closed season and will confidently come to open areas to forage. And besides sufficient patience and the right timing, to track animals, we also need to pay attention to clues they leave behind. The three most typical clues are footprints, droppings, and bends. The first clue is footprints. This should be the most commonly seen animal trace in the forest. Especially after rain, on muddy paths, you might see rows of small footprints. By examining the shape, size, and freshness of these paw prints, experienced people can quickly determine the animal's species, size, and time of appearance. The author still vividly remembers the excitement of seeing wolf paw prints for the first time. He recalled that at that time he was by a remote lake in Sweden, and in the muddy area nearby, he saw a row of paw prints. He immediately confirmed that these belonged to a wolf. First, he generally determined that these paw prints belonged to the canine family based on their symmetrical shape. And in such an uninhabited place, no one would bring a dog for a walk. So the ownership of these tracks was basically confirmed to be a wolf. However, in ordinary forests, wolf and dog footprints are indeed hard to distinguish. The author's experience is that wolves tighten their steps while moving forward, so their paw prints connect in a row, more like strung on a straight line. Of course, you can also look for traces beside these paw prints. If they were made by a dog, then beside these paw prints, there should also be a set of the dog owner's footprints. Droppings are also a powerful tool for identifying animals. For example, to distinguish between wolves and dogs, if you find some droppings beside the tracks, your chances of successful distinction increase significantly. Because most of the diet for domestic pets is canned food, packaged pet food, or some decent meals. After digestion, the excretions from these foods are often uniformly brown and lack noticeable texture. In contrast, if the droppings are left by wild animals like wolves, you might find bone fragments, bits of fur, and other impurities. The third method for searching animals is to look for their dens. When walking in the forests of his hometown, the author often saw fox dens. In most cases, foxes dig several entrances and exits on a slope. It's said that a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. Actually, foxes are similar. You can roughly judge if the den is newly dug or if foxes still live inside by checking if the scratches near the entrance are fresh and if the soil dug out is moist. Speaking of digging dens, another animal that must be mentioned is the badger. Badger dens look similar to fox dens, but they dig deeper and spread some grass at the entrance to make the living environment more comfortable. Additionally, badgers build a separate toilet where they bury their excretions. Badgers can definitely be considered the interior decorators of the forest. In summary, maintaining patience, choosing the right timing, and seizing key clues can greatly increase your chances of finding wildlife in the forest. When you discover animals or enter their gathering areas, What should you pay attention to when interacting with these forest creatures? Regarding this, the author points out some common misconceptions people have. The first misconception is that we must stay completely silent in animal habitats, holding our breath and moving soundlessly. But the author says human voices don't actually disturb large mammals like wild deer and roe deer. What they truly fear are hunters. Through long coexistence and conflict, many animals have learned to identify humans carrying weapons. So when we happily hum songs while walking in the forest, we're actually sending animals a signal. We're not here to hunt. Conveying this friendly signal helps animals feel less tense and frightened. The author recalls leading an expedition team through the woods. The group chatted and laughed along the way without controlling their volume. But right then, the author saw a wildcat walk past him. Keep in mind that wildcats are among the most sensitive animals in the forest. Regarding conveying friendly signals, the author mentions an interesting case. Horseback riders may encounter wildlife more easily. Since horses are herbivores, wild animals like deer and roe deer don't typically see herbivores as threats. If someone sits leisurely on a horse, other animals perceive the person as part of the horse, lowering their guard. This might explain why driving cars sometimes increases animal encounters. Wildlife don't see vehicles as dangerous hunters. Some roe deer even prefer grazing on slopes beside highways. Um, so animals don't fear humans, they fear hunters who bring lethal danger. To build good relationships with forest animals, the first step is emitting friendly signals. But out of love for animals, we might fall into another misconception: eating them. In cold winters, some environmentalists specifically provide fodder to animals like deer and roe deer. Others set up feeding stations stocked with animal food. While this relieves hunger, it actually harms the entire forest ecosystem. Cold winters or food shortages are actually nature's own survival of the fittest mechanism. Only through such elimination can the balance between plant and animal populations in nature be achieved. If people feed animals generously out of kindness, it can lead to too many animals surviving the winter. Then, in the following spring, these surplus animals will consume more plants or seedlings, encroach on weaker animals' territories, and harm the forest's ecological balance. Therefore, the best way to interact with forest animals is to minimize our impact on the forest. Seeing ourselves as part of nature after all this talk about forest flora and fauna, you might be eager to dive in. For the third part on entering the forest, we'll cover practical advice from the book to help people prepare and avoid dangers. As ordinary folks, when we plan to hike or camp in the forest, the first question might be what to wear. The book suggests observing how professionals dress. These professionals refer to forest rangers and loggers who spend all day in the woods. They're meticulous about their gear and never cut corners. For example, clothing material should ideally be a blend of cotton and synthetic fibers. Such fabrics are comfortable and durable. For pants, choose light-colored, pattern-free material to easily spot ticks clinging to them. Additionally, the author specifically addresses the issue of clothing color choice in the forest. So, loggers wear bright colors, even an extra orange vest, to stand out so others can spot them before felling trees and avoid accidents. Forest rangers, however, prefer wearing green outfits while moving about. One reason is they often need to physically measure or touch trees. Loss from trees sticks to clothes, and green makes these stains less obvious. On the other hand, in extreme cases, poachers may attack rangers, so green clothing boosts their camouflage. At this point, someone might say that wearing green could also make it harder for animals to spot you, making it easier to approach them. Actually, that's not the case. Most forest mammals, like wild boars and deer, are colorblind. They can't distinguish red from green. To approach these animals, the best method is to break up your silhouette, like wearing camouflage that fragments your outline with stripes and color blocks. Tiger stripes actually serve a similar purpose, making prey misjudge their size. Beyond proper gear, Safely exploring forests requires mastering emergency response methods. Forests are both enchanting and dangerous, where unexpected situations always arise. For example, how should you react when encountering extreme weather in the forest? The author offers some key tips here. First and foremost, the author strongly advises checking the local weather forecast before departure. But if there's extreme weather like major storms or snow, never attempt to enter the forest. Of course, forest climates are unpredictable. If you're unlucky enough to encounter sudden bad weather, what then? Say you suddenly get caught in a thunderstorm. We've all heard, since childhood, never shelter under trees during lightning. Note that all tree species can be struck. Height is the deciding factor, taller trees being more vulnerable. So during thunderstorms, avoid tall trees, especially hilltop areas where danger is higher.
Compared to thunderstorms, you're more likely to encounter ordinary rain. Sudden downpours are common in forests.
If you unfortunately lack an umbrella or raincoat, consider temporary shelter under a tree. Based on the author's firsthand experience, rain shelter effectiveness varies greatly between tree species.
For example, broadleaf trees have upward slanting branches designed to collect rainwater, channeling it downward to roots.
So, during rain, avoid sheltering under broadleaf trees like oaks or beeches. They're essentially rain collectors.
Unlike broadleaf trees, conifers have horizontally growing branches with outward tips, like umbrella ribs, directing rain away from trunks.
The spruce we mentioned earlier is exactly this type of conifer. On rainy days, staying closer to a spruce trunk keeps you drier. Besides rain, fog is another highly deceptive weather condition. Many might find walking through misty forests romantic, yet heavy fog conceals hidden dangers. While traversing foggy forests, you might hear sudden thunderous crashes, the sound of thick branches falling. This occurs because decayed branches internally develop tiny porous cavities. These sponge-like cavities absorb excessive moisture during high humidity, overburdening branches until they snap and fall.
If standing beneath, you'd certainly be severely injured.
In short, forests enchant but endanger. Always remain hypervigilant when walking through them. These points cover what tourists must heed in forests. Finally, the author addresses humanity's collective forest impact from a ranger's perspective. While sustainability concepts raise deforestation awareness, forest resources like timber hold immense economic value. Thus emerged a new theory. Planting more trees than cut enables sustainable forest economies. This seemingly rational approach, preserving nature while profiting, hides grave dangers. When humans make species serve us, we pressure their evolution. For instance, humans dislike many natural tree traits, like preferring perfectly straight trees. Straight trees look good and work well, but spiral-grown trees like pines or cypresses have spring-like trunks that resist hurricane damage. Unfortunately, spiral trunks are hard to process and low value, clashing with forest economics. So foresters immediately cut saplings displaying this trait. Gradually, only seemingly perfect straight trees survive in forests. The author worries that as these straight trees keep reproducing and spreading, passing their genes to the next generation. But the proportion of trees with spiral growth genes keeps decreasing. This trend building up could really weaken the whole species' ability to fight hurricanes in the future. And from a personal standpoint, our right attitude towards forests should be to minimize messing with them as much as possible. Same goes from a societal or national level. Protecting forests ain't just about saving one or two plants or animals, or making sure their numbers grow sustainably. The truly effective way is setting up big natural reserves and letting forests grow wild on their own. That's the best protection for them. By now, the book's main content has been pretty much covered. In this interpretation, we've not only picked up some forest facts, but also learned about conservation efforts and explored human-forest connections. At the book's end, the author says he hopes readers won't treat this as a manual, but as an appetizer. No need to memorize every little detail. But more importantly, it's about your feeling. When you step into a forest yourself and use all your natural senses to soak it in, You'll find wonders and beauty that are uniquely yours. All right, the wonderful journey through the forest.
That wraps up our take on this book. Listening notes are below the audio. Catch you next time.